Hello and welcome to In Summary. In this episode, we'll dive into one of the most controversial economic policies of 2025, Donald Trump's sweeping rollout of tariffs. We'll trace back how they began, who's affected, what's at stake for the global economy, and where things stand now, from inflation in US homes to legal battles in federal courts. So let's break it all down in summary. After winning the 2024 presidential election, President Trump returned to his signature America First stance. He had long pledged to impose what he described as reciprocal tariffs, charging foreign countries the same rates they charge the United States, in order to counterbalance what he described were unfair trade practices. On February the 13th, he signed a memorandum initiating a review of potential tariffs country by country.
For decades, our country has been looted, pillaged, raped, and plundered by nations near and far, both friend and foe alike. American steelworkers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen, we have a lot of them here with us today. They really suffered gravely. They watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. We had an American dream that you don't hear so much about. You did 4 years ago, and you are now, but you don't too often, and for many years and decades even, you didn't hear too much about. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore.
By early March, his administration had unveiled what it called the Declaration of Economic Independence under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. On April the 2nd, the so-called Liberation Day, a baseline 10% tariff was imposed on nearly 86% of all US imports. On top of this sweeping measure, specific countries faced much higher rates, 34% on Chinese goods, 20% on imports from the European Union, 24% on Japanese products, and nearly 46% on Vietnamese goods. Trump defended the tariffs as a way to revive US manufacturing, reduce trade deficits, and provide discipline in global supply chains.
And, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. And we take everything from them. Millions of cars, tremendous amounts of food and farm products. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I think that one can be worked out. But the European Union it's an atrocity.
Critics, however, immediately warned of higher consumer prices, inflationary pressure, supply chain disruptions, and long-term economic damage. The Congressional Budget Office released an early analysis stating that Trump's tariffs would reduce the federal deficit by approximately $2.8 trillion over 10 years. However, the same report warned that inflation would rise, household purchasing power would decline, and overall economic growth would slow. The CBO projected that the tariffs would add roughly 0.4 percentage points to inflation annually and reduce GDP growth by about 0.6 percentage points each year. Meanwhile, studies forecasted that the average American household would lose nearly $4,700 annually as a result of price increases caused by the tariffs. Everyday items like clothing were expected to jump by more than 60%, while the price of new cars could climb by as much as $9,000. Wage reductions would add further strain to households already struggling with rising costs. Additional modelling for the Tax Foundation emphasised that the tariffs effectively represented the largest tax increase in decades, raising federal revenue by more than $165 billion in 2025 alone, but also dragging down productivity, wages and private investment. Economists have described the policy as generating what they call rolling inflation. Instead of a one-time shock in prices, The economy is now experiencing sector-by-sector price surges. This has created a kind of whiplash where customers face sudden and unpredicted spikes in cost, sometimes in essential goods, sometimes in discretionary spending, making the inflationary environment more disorienting than usual. The tariffs triggered immediate unrest across global supply chains. American retailers such as Walmart, Target and Home Depot warned that the higher import costs would inevitably be passed down to shoppers. While price increases were initially modest in some sectors, consumer optimism began to waver as the cost of everyday essentials steadily crept up. At the port of Los Angeles, importers rushed to front-load shipments ahead of tariff deadlines. July became the single busiest month in the port's 117-year history as businesses scrambled to beat higher import costs. Meanwhile, industries reliant on metals, minerals and intermediate components faced harsh realities. Australia's BlueScope, one of the largest steel makers with US operations, reported a staggering 90% drop in annual profit. The company blamed tariffs for increased costs and slumping demand and immediately wrote down hundreds of millions in assets. Countries hit by US tariffs quickly retaliated or signalled their intent to do so. India, for example, saw tariffs on its exports to the United States jump from 25% to 50%. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called the tariffs unfair and vowed not to compromise. Analysts estimated that Indian exports of shrimp, apparel and chemicals could fall by up to 70%, delivering a heavy blow to one of the world's fastest growing economies. Some warned that the tariffs could ripple through India's banking sector, reducing credit demand and raising financial stress among exporters. In the Middle East, Gulf economies used the tariffs as a signal to diversify away from US trade.
And I really think we're helped a lot by the tariff situation that's going on, which is a good situation, not a bad. It's great. It's going to be legendary. You watch, legendary in a positive way, I have to say. It's going to be legendary. But I really think it actually puts pressure on those few Republicans that just can't get there. You know what the alternative is? A Democrat bill or a chapter for the country. You know, we have the debt continuation, and they have to do this. They have to get there, and I think we are there. We had a great meeting today. I think we are there. But just in case there are a couple of Republicans out there, you just got to get there. Close your eyes and get there. It's a phenomenal bill. Stop grandstanding.
Analysts argue that the new policy could accelerate deeper partnerships between Gulf states and countries like India and China, as both sides look to insulate themselves from American protectionism. Meanwhile, the European Union and the United Kingdom also introduced retaliatory duties, heightening transatlantic trade tensions. Goldman Sachs warned that tit-for-tat tariffs could end up costing the global economy as much as $1.4 trillion, while growth forecasts for the United Kingdom and parts of Europe were immediately downgraded. Domestically, Trump's tariff plan faced an unexpected hurdle in the courts. On May the 28th, the US Court of International Trade ruled that the president's sweeping Liberation Day tariffs exceeded his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The court found that using it to justify such broad economic measures violated constitutional norms under what is known as the Major Questions Doctrine. As a result, the court issued a permanent injunction ordering US Customs and Border Protection to stop collecting the tariffs. Although litigation continues and appeals are likely, the ruling was a rare instance of the judiciary stepping in to limit presidential power over trade. Although litigation continues and appeals are likely, the ruling was a rare instance of the judiciary stepping in to limit presidential power over trade. The legal battle has added new uncertainty, leaving businesses unsure of whether tariffs will remain in place or be rolled back in the months to come. Supporters of the tariffs point out that they could generate trillions of dollars in revenue over time, but critics argue that these gains are outweighed by broader economic harm. The long-term costs of slower economic growth, lost wages, and higher consumer prices appear to cancel out the benefits. Environmental analysts also weighed in on the policy. One study concluded that the tariffs would trim global carbon dioxide emissions by just 0.3%, a negligible effect compared to the economic cost. In other words, the tariffs do little to address climate change while inflicting significant damage on consumers and international trade. As of mid-August, the tariff environment remains volatile and unpredictable. The Trump administration continues to propose new rounds of tariffs and threaten high rates on existing ones, keeping businesses and markets on edge. At the same time, legal challenges and injunctions have
Trump
slowed
said regarding the ongoing war.
Markets have been jittery. When a US customs ruling briefly suggested that tariffs would apply to gold, American retailers, meanwhile, remain cautious in their public statements. Companies like Walmart have stopped short of directly blaming earning challenges on tariffs, a sign that corporate leaders are wary of clashing with the administration on a politically charged issue. Nonetheless, many admit privately that higher import costs are squeezing both margins and customers. In summary, Trump's tariffs represent one of the most sweeping trade policies in modern US history. They were designed to enforce fairer trade practices, bolster domestic manufacturing, and generate revenue for the federal government. Yet the policy has come with steep costs. Consumer prices have risen, inflationary pressures have mounted, and household purchasing power has been eroded. Businesses reliant on imports face disruptions and supply chain chaos. Globally, retaliatory measures have strained diplomatic ties, created new geopolitical tensions, and triggered concerns of a broader trade war. Domestically, courts have questioned the president's authority to impose such tariffs, creating legal uncertainty that complicates the policy's future. Ultimately, the success or failure of the tariffs may depend less on revenue projections and more on public perception, market resilience, and the outcomes of ongoing legal battles. For now, the policy remains one of the most defining issues of 2025, shaping the global economic outlook and the daily lives of millions of Americans. And if you like this summary, like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.